All right, that's it. That's all of it. That's everything we're going to get for the next week. That is, right? All of the heroes are out. A lot of their cards have been spoiled. And today we got a bunch of interesting new little weapons to play with. They look pretty good. Let's dive into what has been spoiled so far. I'll give you my initial reactions on how the set might be drafted, played, and its impact on CC. We'll go really light in this one, and then we're going to talk about what those weapons are going to look like. I'm excited. I'll see you in Queenstown very soon. I'm going to be putting out all the content I'm allowed to put out, talking about all the new stuff, seeing the new cards. Me and Ethan are going to be running around, hopefully posting some really cool stuff on Savage Feats, and obviously we're covering not only the premiere, not only the calling, but we're also covering the celebrational. So you guys should tune into Savage Feats for any of the content we put out, and then tune in to LSS's official FabTCG YouTube, because we are going to put on a show. Now let's dive into it. I forgot to mention, we're getting litty. All right. So I'm going to show the placeholders real quick, just so we know kind of a little bit more what we're talking about here. But we've got all of the Brute heroes. I already talked about these. KO's absolutely disgusting. Monster. Armories are going to be really interesting. Rhinar, right? New mechanic. Beat chest. Mostly helps him a little bit more than it helps KO, right? Cards so far, the two Majestics, very, very powerful for Brute players. This is looking really good, right? So these two Majestics, if that shows anything for the consistency of the rest of the set, these cards are good. Very good. This is a very powerful Brute card. Show no mercy here for Rhinar. We're also seeing a little bit more depth with Brute cards, right? This card actively scans. This card actively does more than just kind of a discard and do something, right? Brute cards have always been very simplistic, and now we're starting to see a little bit more of a slippery way to be a Brute, right? Like this with the discard cards and all that kind of stuff. You can you can do damage, and you can make your opponent make mistakes, especially with discard instants. We'll see later. Show no fear or no fear. Also very tricky, right? Very interesting. It can avoid things like spinal crushes. It can avoid things like CNC or pummel, right? Really, really good. And it also interacts weirdly with Levia and, weird diabolic offering plays, right? So there's a lot of depth to these cards. One interesting thing about this set so far, almost every other class, they kind of play in a lane, right? Wager versus Clash, or Gold versus Wager, or something like that, right? Both Brute heroes don't care. Neither of these heroes care about the new mechanics at all. Their tokens are almost irrelevant to the drafting. So KOs and Rhinars are going to have a little bit harder of a time discerning like what the other Brute players are going to pick, right? So the only real difference, honestly, is that KO can play with fives. So he has a lot more freedom to build a deck off of yellows and blues that are bad, right? So KO might be easier if you have a bad card pool to play than maybe Rhinar is, but we'll see. Way more cards are going to come out. But yeah, very interesting thing is that Brutes don't really seem to fall into a line there, so it's a little bit more open-ended on their drafting. And then these beat chest cards, right? Really, really sick for Brutes in the long run, because this is the first time we've ever gotten a may trigger on our cards. Like, you may discard a card. Normally, it's like you have to roll a dice. You have to discard a card. You have to do something. Your cards are bad. But right now, it's looking good. It's looking really good. So this 2 for 6 straight up can go into your deck as KO or as Rhinar, because KO probably doesn't really want to discard that much unless it's like a draw discard. So I can see why they did it. It does bring a semblance of balance between the two heroes without having to like overprint Brute cards to make them both playable. So it makes sense. Also super good for Rhinar, because occasionally your opponent would leave you with more cards than you can handle. Sometimes it happens. They say, okay, pass Arsenal. And you looked at all 4 of your cards in your hand. You're like, I better hit Scabs right now. Otherwise, these cards are trash. And most of the time you didn't hit Scabs because that's how it works. So now Beat Chest is just a main mechanic. So if you end your Blood Rush and you have a 2-cost 6 in your arsenal, like Rawhide Rumble, and you have an extra 6 in your hand, you can just pop that boy into the discard pile and intimidate, which is cool. So way more brute freedom than ever before. Hilarious that our brutes are being caged up while we get more freedom, you know? Bad joke. All right. And then another interesting thing for brutes before we move on. This card really interacts with Reinhar's club very well. So maybe for the first time ever, we're going to see like aggro, crazy Leviah. We're going to see absolute monkey KO. And then we're going to have a brute that goes into a really defensive lane and plays like very valuable 2-3 card hands. If they do that, brutes are in such a cool spot because maybe we won't have 3 degenerate Blood Rush abusers. Maybe, right? Also, KO now has Mandible Claw. So as soon as this guy berserks his way into Living Legend, all of the brutes are going to cry. Yeah. Okay. And then we got, like a little bit, some blues and whatever. It's pretty good, but it's like you could play a Time Snap Potion and it's basically the same thing. Except for it doesn't block. Sure. And then we got our Guardians. Okay. Betsy, absolute degenerate monster. I love her. Her style is sick. Look at that like giant wolf thing and her giant totem pole, which they haven't revealed yet, right? So she has a weapon that we haven't seen yet. We'll talk about the new weapons later, but no totem pole shown so far. So we can assume that it's somewhere in here. And then we got Victor, right? So very different from what the brutes look like, right? These two heroes play in a very specific lane based on their hero ability. She wants to wager and he wants to clash, okay? Hero ability-wise, Betsy kind of is very akin to Bravo. Pay 2, get overpower. The only real differentiation is that she gets a +1, so she had a little bit more damage, which is kind of cool. And then overpower, which if you're playing against a defensive hero with a lot of D-reacts, an instance never got hit, so sorry, but a lot of D-reacts and block cards, Betsy's a little worse than Bravo, right? So Bravo gets dominated on the stick. You have to have a D-react in your arsenal or something clever. Otherwise, he's going to do damage to you. Betsy, if she plays overpower on a stick and you happen to have 4 block cards or D-reacts or whatever, you can just shut her down. No problem. But she does more damage. So we'll see how that evolves over time. Dominate being a very, very powerful keyword. It's going to be interesting to see, how she compares to Bravo. Especially both of these two heroes, since they're tied into wagering and tied into clashing. A lot of the time we've seen that new heroes in the CC meta who have a very specific ability supported by a brand new set, it takes them a while to evolve, like Arachne and until like Azuri came around and, so sometimes it's a little harder for them to be super powerful right out of the gate because it takes like 2 or 3 sets to give them supplemental cards to be really powerful. But we'll see. Guardian cards are pretty best. All right, so we got a Clash Guardian. Seems to be the most aggressive one. His hero text is like snatch on a stick if you, create a gold token. So he gets to draw cards. Every time he clashes, he can kind of do it again if he spends a gold token. So he's very aggressive, it seems. And she's pretty much standard brute or standard guardian, right? And then his weapon, this weapon's crazy, but it is a double-edged sword, right? So this is a breakpoint that constantly lets him generate gold and obliterate your deck, right? So he gets a clash, he gets to obliterate parts of your deck. He can kind of fatigue you in a weird way with a breakpoint, but as soon as you outclash him, this card gets worse and worse and worse until it does nothing. So against certain decks, this card is actually very good, right? Like, ninjas aren't really gonna, unless you hit a non-attack action, they're not gonna outclash you. And because of his hero ability, he, gets to redo. So very good. Big bet, Betsy's specialization. This card is absolutely nuts, to be very honest. So 4 cost 8, right? 4 cost 8, and when this attacks a hero, you can wager a gold, a might, and a vigor token with them. So you can just like dumpster out a bunch of on-hit effects for next turn or effects for next turn. And 4 for 8 is like really good, very on rate. And then especially when she starts doing stuff like this, right? If she overpowers it and gives it +1, we're talking about 9 for 2 blues with overpower. Pretty good. And then Victor's ability, his specialization, also super, super strong. Super strong, because what makes this card really interesting, again, a 4 for 7 is like maybe not quite as good as Big Bet from a damage perspective, but as soon as this card is clashed from the top of your deck, you have 3 copies in your deck. As soon as you clash and this card is revealed, it gives you a gold token. And then because your hero ability interacts with gold, you can draw this card by sacrificing your gold. And now you have this extra card in your hand. You also get the +3 on it. And now you have a 4 for 10 with card advantage. Very strong. So 4 for 10, already really good. And the fact that it gives you card advantage, meaning that you have more resources to do extra stuff, I don't know, pummel it or whatever, it's gross. Of course, you have to clash to get it on, and it has to be on the top of your deck. But like when that lines up, you're gonna home run somebody out of the park. And then we got an interesting card here, Boast. Probably the strongest. Okay, Test of Agility is also very strong, but probably the strongest straight up block card right now, right? It's a blue block 3. So its floor is that it's a block card that pitches for 3. Like it's a standard block. And if you clash, it gets +X, or number of times you win, so you get twice, right? So if you clash 1 time, this gets +2, right? Pretty good. So now this card blocks for 5. So we'll see how hard it is to clash, especially as Victor on the defensive stage and stuff like that. But this is pretty much a blue block 3 that has the upside of maybe being a blue block 5 or 7. That's good. And then stacked in your favor. So we're getting a weird mix of a very high attack value cards for very cheap that do a lot of damage, that do a lot of on hits. And then we're getting these defensive cards here. This one's pretty hard for me to honestly give a great opinion on, because I think it's really going to matter of the context of the deck and the meta. But this card right here, 2, go again, gives you your cards +3 block on your next turn. And then you get to kind of lightly hand filter by replacing 1 card from your hand with on top of your deck. The upside of this card is it's 2 cost block 24, or 2 card block 24 on your next turn, which is kind of crazy. You can block 6 4 times if everything lined up perfectly. However, the blue, since it's a block 2, then you're sacrificing 2 cards to get +4 isn't so great, right? So the multiplicative value of this card, the pitch differentiation is very high. So it's interesting how we have a very aggressive set of heroes, very aggressive specializations, and then a bunch of block cards. And then we're getting some towering cards, which is a playstyle I've always wished Guardians had. So I might mess around with a towering Guardian. We saw it in the Professor supplemental Blitz set, right? Some towering cards. We saw some towering cards before that, but they were never really meta. So hopefully a towering Guardian comes in and we see some guy crippling crush his opponent in the finals of a calling for 25. Dominated. That'd be sick. Okay. And then, kind of the same style, whatever. Right, same style as Reinhar's, right? Okay. Then we got our Warriors. Art on this card is nuts. The art in this entire set is absolutely disgusting. Look at all of this. It's also beautiful so far. And the Warriors are also more laney, but a little bit less than the Guardians. The Brutes do whatever they want. The Guardians kind of playing their role as a clash versus wager. And then the Warriors do have a theme to them, right? So Kasai, you want to have yellows in your deck, which is important. You want to have reds in your deck, which everybody does. And then you want to have gold tokens. Okay, so she's kind of still gold-based or currency-based, her old young form was currency-based. And then she gets to create gold tokens, right? So banish 2 cards and 2 cards, so 2 reds, 2 yellows. Then if your swords hit this turn or your attacks hit this turn, you get to create a gold. However, Olympia, he wants to wager, but he's still interacting with gold. So he wants more wager cards probably than Kasai does. And wagering is very powerful on Warriors because they are the tricky class, right? Attack reactions and all that kind of jazz, right? So they both want gold, but Olympia does want more wager. So I would say, one more time, Guardians really playing a line, Brutes have no rules, and then, Olympia wants more wager versus just gold generation and yellows. Okay, so we know she's interacting with her Centauri sabers like she always has. It's her pinnacle weapon. When she LLs, so does the Centauri saber. And then we get Olympia specialization, which is just like a fat wall of text, right? Yeah, warriors are starting to have to do math. Welcome to the Brute Club. So choose one X plus one card cost X. We love to do algebra. So you get to wager, an agility, a gold, and a vigor token, and the attacks I get plus Y, where Y is the number of times you've wagered this turn. So you can kind of dump out a triple wager and, you know, really be annoying, you know? Warriors are always kind of annoying. So it's a buff to your cards, super strong, right? We know how attack reactions work, Dorinthia, right? So this is pretty good. And then you also get the benefit of getting a bunch of buffs on your next turn, which is also really, really good. And then Kasai's specialization is terrifying to me because now there's a warrior out there with all of the tricks in the book, and suddenly she becomes Dromite. I don't like that at all. And you can't pop them. Super cool. So she wants to generate gold, kind of like how she did before with blood on her hands. She wanted to generate a bunch of currency and then pop off, right? Kasai wants to generate a bunch of gold and then pop off. Kind of close. I like the theme. I really like it a lot. I think this is a super sick card. And the little warrior guys are actually quite powerful. You can see them here. They have go again. They attack for 3, and you can only attack with them if your swords hit. So suddenly, like, I don't know, you build an entire army, and now every time you hit for the rest of the game, your opponent might take 24. So we'll see how that goes. I'm kind of scared of it. And then we get some wager-specific attack reactions. So this one for me is really interesting because if you compare it to, you know, Dory's, like, reprise versus wager, right? Reprise is, you can play around reprise. You can't play around them forcing you to wager. So this is actually quite good if wager is supported enough, right? If there's enough wager cards in the set, then cards like this are really, really strong, because one of the downfalls of Dorinthia a lot of the time is, like, you know, you count their graveyard 34 times during the game. You know that they have handful, you know, they have X number of reprise cards left. They throw a Naked Dawn Blade at you and you go, I'm absolutely not blocking you, right? Like, I know what you have left. This is a reprise card. I'm not giving you the reprise, and they suffer for it, right? Now you can be like, I'm wagering, and now I can 0 for 3 you on the reaction step, which is honestly pretty good. And then we have our handful of crossover cards here, right? So what makes these really interesting, honestly, these are kind of like generic 3 for 7s that I don't, 3 for 7 blocks 2s, which honestly is kind of interesting, but, you know, I don't really see a lot of people running these cards in CC meta. However, for brutes, this allows a whole lot of really interesting things you can do. So, you know, we used to run Clearing Bellow, which was a 0 cost Intimidate that blocked 3. Now you can run this one, which is the exact same text, only it also gives you a might token, and it also can be attacked with if you're getting into a fatigue state, right? So brutes probably like these the most. Otherwise, they're you know, they're 3 for 7s. There's plenty of better 3 for 7s, like they're, you know, Wounded Bull, Heart of Fendal's Fighting Spirit, stuff like that, that pretty much are probably more stapley for every other deck in the game, but brutes really enjoy this card. The most interesting one to me is the agility one, because on turn 0 you can dump it. It also interacts really interestingly with Reinar's new specialization, you know. So this card right here, you barraging beatdown, play Show No Mercy. They have, or whatever, they block with 2 cards and then you instant out a discard, and they have to get rid of a card from their hand. Suddenly you turn on all the text of this card. Kind of tricky for a brute. It's like the most tricky thing we've ever been able to do. So I like it. But yeah, draft trash. Mostly, I think it has a lot of interactions with Reinar, though. A little less for KO, but even then, turn 0 KO to make an agility token. Cool. And a might token. Okay, so now we're going to get into the wager and clash and the hybrid cards, right? So, you know, Again, 3 for 7 block twos, but they all have different text on them pretty much. This one is the instant discard. These ones are the wager. And then you have some clash cards like Test of Agility here. This card is absolutely bonkers for Reinar and maybe for KO, depending on how the deck building goes. But when you defend with this and you win a clash, which against anybody but a Guardian or like another Brute is like pretty high chance, you create an agility token. So you block 4. And then on your turn, you can do something like pitch a blue, CNC swing big, or swing big, swing big. If you swing big, Test of Agility, that's a 4-card 20 with Tunic. That's cracked. So a lot of 2, 3 for 7s that block for 2. The blocking for 2 is kind of interesting. So they really didn't, I feel like they didn't want this set to be really easy for you to fatigue. Maybe they didn't, maybe LSS didn't super enjoy the old, the Outsiders fatigue strategy, or like even like the generic fatigue strategy in Bright Lights. So maybe they were like, okay, let's cut the blocks down a lot, but give them a lot of cool, flavorful text so they can do a lot of cool, flavorful things on their turn and do interesting stuff and have like these really big wow moments. But they didn't want us to like just fatigue each other into the floor, I guess. Probably. We got some generic equipment, a lot of equipment in this set, apparently a lot of weapons in this set. This is also kind of weird because this set is playable as a draft multiplayer format, right? So you can draft this in the multiplayer version of Fab, like the 4-player version. So this interacts with that version, and it's just generic draft trash, right? Pretty good though. The art is so sick for a Blade Break block 1. It's really sick. Same thing with like the shield. Cool. Reinar can run a shield now. Interesting. And then our generics, right? So wage some gold interaction, gold interaction, clash interaction, and then your tokens here, right? So this set is just like Outsiders, where it is a 3-token set, right? We have our agility tokens, our might tokens, and our vigor tokens. Brutes interact with agility and might, mostly, right? Warriors interact with gold and I believe might, mostly. And then Guardians interact with vigor and might, mostly. Okay, so I think Warriors also interact with agility, weirdly. So they kind of interact with all of them. But yeah, Brutes are stuck in their lane and Guardians are pretty much stuck in their lane. And then, of course, we have our supplemental sets, which is interesting because they didn't spoil 2 of them. Last time they did this, they spoiled them all straight up. So we have 2 left, which is really cool. So 2 classes are still left getting support. And then our really cool promo cards that are quite powerful interact. Talking Big Game is really good. Runner is honestly really good. And this card is quite good as well. Okay, so let's dive into the new weapons they spoiled now that we kind of understand the gist of what's going on. All right. Okay, so these are blurry and really hard to read. It's not just my screen and it's not my camera. It's just what they are. Okay, they're just blurry. I don't know why they didn't give us a high definition photo. It's very frustrating. So I'll read it the best I can. You might not be able to. However, we got some cool interactions here. Parry Blade, new warrior one. 2 for 1 attack, very similar to Centauri Saber, right? However, this card can be blocked with. This is a weapon that can block for 2. And of course, it explodes once you're done blocking with it. You parry an attack, and it explodes for some reason. However, this is the first time we've ever seen this in the game, and it's cool. And honestly, it gives a lot of freedom for warriors in this set, where you kind of do like you can do a Hail Mary play, or you can do something really interesting with like in that last onesie twosies health range. You and your opponent are very low. Any mistake will cost you the game. You can throw out your parry blade, blow up your weapon, survive that turn, throw your second sword, and then go like, do I have the attack reaction, right? And then out of nowhere, your opponent overblocks or something. I don't know, whatever, right? Pretty cool. I actually really like this one-handed weapon that blocks. Very nifty. Warriors already had a refrigerator. Maybe this could one day make its way into like a super turtle warrior or something. I don't know, right? Hot streak. 1 resource attack for 2, just like every other kind of one-handed weapon for warrior so far. When this is defended by one or more attack action cards, hot streak attacks get go again. Okay. So this is another really interesting draft weapon. I actually really like this one in a 20 health format. Okay. Imagine you're at 6 health. Your opponent throws this at you, and you have to make the decision to go, I'll just eat 2 damage and lose a third of my life, or I'll block it and give them go again. And so it gives them so much creativity in the way that they can line their attacks up on their turns to constantly make you guess whether or not they have any follow-up to the go again anyways. Because like it could just be a 0 for 3 attack action buff. So if you block it, you just eat the damage, and they get go again, and then they can follow up with their second sword, or you take the 2 and they had nothing in their hand. I think it's really cool. I think the dynamic of these 2 cards is very cool. And then we saw this one already spoiled with the new Guardian hero, Goldmane. Very, very, very powerful. Has a very but has a bad downside, right? This weapon could eventually equal 0. But until it equals 0 or until it equals 3, it's a breakpoint attack that generates deck obliteration and gold. It's very good. And then we got a new one here, High Riser. So all of the Guardian ones tend to follow the same kind of format. 3 for 3 plus 1 or 3 for 4. Typically, it's how it works. So if you've drawn a card this turn, this gets +1. So it is a safer version of this card. If you've drawn a card based on your hero ability or based on an aura or based on whatever, this card comes in for 4. So if you're building a deck that generates a lot of card draw somehow, and then your blues pretty much are always worth 4, which is like a very good floor, right? Guardians are used to just bonking you for 4 until you die. All right. And then the brute cards. These ones are really interesting because I think they're the hardest to understand, right? The warrior ones are very tricky, very cool, very fun. The Guardian ones, a little bit more dangerous and a little bit safer, but very typical for Guardian cards. And we're in a whole new world for brutes because these are weird, right? So 2 for 3 and 2 for 3. So not super strange for a one-headed brute weapon, right? We know mandible claws are 2 for 3, and then they have a claws that that lets them have go again. However, mini Medax though, attack for 2 resources, 3 damage. When this attacks, draw a card and then discard a random card. So we all know how much we hate drawing and discarding as a Rhinar player, but as a KO player, it's pretty easy. You're just like, whatever, right? So this is a 2 for 4 one-handed weapon and KO because it generates a might token, assuming you haven't already generated a might token this turn. So the floor here is not bad. 2 for 4 is pretty good for a one-handed weapon. It's like actually nuts. It's cracked. So 2 for 4 is like up there. It's the strongest one-handed weapon power-wise. You're going to get in brute class. It also allows Rhinar, who can dual wield, KO cannot, to maybe possibly do things like beat chest, somehow mandible claw or a go again attack, discard a card, and then attack with this. And now this 3 damage is coming through with no interaction, right? Like beat chest is a discard, go again, assuming you have some sort of discard, and then this comes through with a second or third intimidate, and now you're like really forcing awkward blocks and forcing awkward damage to your opponent. So if you can find a way to like 2-card double intimidate, 3-card double intimidate constantly while blocking 3, you're making your opponent's turn really difficult because you might be intimidating the right cards and they don't want to defend with their power cards. And then towards the end of the game, they're going to have to defend with whatever they have left in their hand. So there might be some heavier dynamic there, like double intimidating every turn could put your opponent in a really bad state when they have to block. So really interesting to me. And then Ball Breaker. This one's cool. Funny name. It's a flail. Unfortunately, I don't think any cards in the game interact with flails. So you can't pummel a flail. I don't think there's any attack reactions that work with flail that Rhinar has access to. So it's just going to do the damage. There's no like tricks with this card. 2 for 3 again, but if you've discarded a card with 6 or more power this turn, it gains +1. I think it is very difficult, you guys, to see if that's a 1 or a 2. It looks squiggly, but I'm going to go with 1 because if it's a 2, that's cracked. So this is just a one-handed romping club without the text, right? So you can do things like beat chest into this weapon, and you'll get the +4 or the +5, and then you attack with this card, and then suddenly, you know, this is coming in for 9 on 3 cards or whatever, right? So not bad, actually. So that's all the weapons. And these aren't even all of them, because we know that Betsy has a weapon we haven't seen yet, right, in the pictures. We know that KO probably has a weapon that we haven't seen yet. Is it a reprint of Mandible Claw? Maybe, likely, but it could also be new. And then Reinhardt was shown with this club. We haven't seen that either. So I can only assume, based on Betsy having an extra card, and we know that Reinhardt, or we likely can insinuate that there's the Romping Club and the Mandible Claw, which would give Brutes 4. We know Betsy has one. So there's probably a 4th Guardian, and there's probably, you know, Centauri Saber, there's probably a 4th Warrior weapon, right? So there's 3 more weapons or 2 more weapons we don't know what they are, likely. Yeah, so that's my thoughts. It's going to be interesting. It's a pretty safe set, to be honest. Like the heroes, from what I can tell so far, it's going to be really fun to play because I'm not seeing like a distinct advantage so far. You know, warriors are always really dangerous, and warriors are super dangerous in a limited format a lot of the time because of the tricks. And then, of course, Betsy might be able to just dominate you every turn until you die. But, you know, when you looked at like Dynasty or whatever, like Phi stood out immediately. You're like, this guy just vomits, go again. And he has intrinsic +1 on every one of his turns. Like, how is this guy going to lose? So far, these heroes all look pretty fair, honestly. And they all look like they have an avenue to like win the game, and they're tricky enough that I think all of them have like cool and unique plays they can do. And the wager and clash mechanics are really, really like, they're really going to be fundamental, I feel, because the tokens are so powerful, right? If a Guardian always has a Vigor and a Might token, if a Brute always has Go Again, if a Warrior always has Go Again or breakpoints, right? Like, they're going to be way harder to beat. So those mechanics are really, there's a lot of depth to them. All right, so I'll see you guys in Queenstown. Those of you who are there, we're giving out some playmats. I'll have some stuff with me. Can't wait to meet you all. Let's go grab some beers or whatever. I'll see you later. Bye.